Right, I think we'll make a start. That's okay with everyone. I know we've got all our panelists present, and I can see that a number of people have joined and are continuing to join. But as it's approaching 10:35, we'll make a start and hopefully have a good chance of finishing on time. Welcome to the latest in our series of circular economy focused events based here in Opportunity Peterborough. Today's slightly different. It brings together two topics which perhaps a lot of the time are seen as very separate topics, that of circular economy and its impact on sustainability, and also Industry 4.0, or the adoption of new technologies in businesses, usually to increase productivity and so on. What we try looking at doing today is looking at the links between those two agendas, and there are very clear links. My name's Trevor Gibson. I'm the Smart City Leadership and Development Manager with Opportunity Peterborough. And in fact, the dual topic today is at the heart of what we do for the city. We're about economic development, but we're about sustainable economic development and breaking the what was once an inevitable link almost between economic development and the reduction and negative impacts on the environment. Before we start, I'll just introduce our panelists today, and you'll be hearing from them in this order. We've got Holly Stower, Lead Associate, Resources and Environment at the Cleantech Group. So she'll be joining us in about 20 minutes time. Dr. Lewis Walsh, who's the Marketing Lecturer at the Faculty of Business and Law at Anglia Ruskin University. And Robin Haycock, the Director of Fernhay Partners. In fact, Robin will be on before Lewis, and then you'll hear from me later in the event to sum up and to close. We're also trying something a little different today, although there'll be an opportunity for participants to ask questions directly. We're also putting out a number of polls, polling questions, which participants will be able to vote on. We'll see the results on the screen, and we'll use those polls, those questions, if you like, as the approach to prompt the panel into discussing the topics that we've got in front of us today. So welcome to the panelists. Again, before I start the presentation, we've got a couple of polls we just want to run past you, and it really sets the scene for the event today. The first one, if we're ready to go with this, and someone behind the scenes, my colleague Rebecca, is running the polls, is how well you and the participants understand the concept of circular economy. Very well, have a basic understanding, or the concept is totally new to me. So you'll see on your screen now that you have the question and the three responses. If you'd like to select a response and then click submit, that will be really helpful. I'll just give people a few seconds to do that. Okay. Well, that's interesting and reassuring to a degree, in that well over half of our people present today have a very good understanding of circular economy, and some with a basic understanding. So hopefully we can work on that today, and no one in our audience or participating today has ticked that they have no knowledge of it, which is also reassuring. I think we're making progress across the board on that. The second poll is about the role of new technology, so picking up the other theme today. And the question is simply, as you can see on the screen, have you considered the role that new technology can play in supporting the transition to a more circular way of working? Again, the three choices there: from giving it a lot of consideration to having considered it much. So again, if I could give you a few seconds just to submit your responses. Okay, it should be in there. Yeah, there we have it again. Some very similar responses actually, that everybody in the audience and participating today have considered it to some degree. So again, we hope that today's event will just prompt further thought on that. So thank you for that. So I think provides a bit of useful background. And as I said, we will be using the same approach at the end of the event to prompt the discussion. If people in the audience would like to, there is a chat box facility on the screen. Please pop questions in there, but certainly we'd like you to introduce yourself, who you are, your business or organization, and also a little bit about your role in that organization. It's just for useful in capturing things from today's events. Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to my presentation now on slide 2, which is basically a summary of Peterborough's position at the moment. Some facts and figures about the city, and some of those may come as a surprise to you. The scale of the regeneration projects going on in the city, the speed at which the population is growing, and the second highest in the UK for jobs growth over recent years, as you can see there. So all of that presents challenges, positive challenges in many ways for a city. There are 2 things on there around smart city leadership and around creating the truly circular city, which are designed to mitigate the impacts of that growth. And that's really, as I said at the outset, what today's presentation is about. So from Peterborough's point of view, Circular Peterborough came about through that smart city role. As you can see from the next slide, we launched Circular Peterborough quite a few years ago now through the Circular Peterborough commitment. It was part of our Future Peterborough programme. We were designated as one of 4 UK future city demonstrators at the very beginning of the smart city movement, and the Circular Peterborough element was our way of focusing on the environmental impacts of the work we were doing, and to reduce the city's carbon footprint. And it very much nowadays forms an integral part of the city's carbon reduction strategy. Next slide, please. It has a number of elements, and you can click through these quite quickly, Rebecca, behind the scenes. In the Circular Peterborough commitment was, as I mentioned, where we started first off. We got businesses together initially from the Fengate area of Peterborough to look at what they could share, what they needed, what they had as spare or waste materials. That led to the Circular Peterborough commitment, if you like, a sharing of knowledge, expertise, and materials to make industries more effective. We had a Share Peterborough platform, which I'll say a little bit more about later on. We have a range of circular city champions where we identified people with particular interest and experience in key areas such as agri-tech and food manufacturing. And a number of collaborative projects. The one shown in the picture there was the Innovation Lab. It's changed function now, but we developed an innovation lab in partnership with Anglia to really look at some of the innovations that circular approaches could bring to the city. Next slide, please. Although the poll showed at the outset that people are certainly people in this audience are well aware of the circular economy and what it means. I always start with this particular slide just to show that currently, although thankfully it is changing, we do live in a very linear society, a linear economy, where raw materials are extracted, items are manufactured and assembled, they're sold, usually via delivery nowadays, used, and often at the end of their life, they're disposed of as either household or industrial waste. Because of that, that linear characteristic, almost a third of, and that's a conservative estimate, almost a third of waste is food rather, is wasted along that value chain. Most cars are parked for the vast majority of their time, and an average office, up to half of its time is spent in empty. And I would imagine that that last statistic has increased dramatically through the lockdowns, and probably will never get back to the level of usage that those premises had before. So we need to shift to more circular models, as the next slide indicates. And again, it's a very simple representation, but it keeps the value of products and services and components in circulation for as long as possible. So the amount of resources, particularly rare or limited resources, the amount of resources entering the system are kept to an absolute minimum, and the amount of waste leaving the system after manufacture, consumption, use, through recycling, remanufacturing, repair, and so on, the amount of waste leaving the system is kept to an absolute minimum, with the ultimate goal of zero waste. We approach this through Circular Peterborough through the 7 Rs, which is about rethinking, redesign, repair, recover, and so on. So those are the key areas of focus that we apply. Next slide, please. The circular advantage, again, will be known to many of you on the panel and indeed in the audience. There are clearly savings on procurement, because you shouldn't need to buy the same quantity of raw materials. You can save on production through efficiencies, and on retaining products and services for longer, utilising them, getting more value from them. There also offers new sources of innovation and therefore revenue. There are many opportunities now, because we're at the very beginning of this transition in many ways. There are still many opportunities to innovate with waste materials, with new business models that can be improved customer relationships. A number of companies I've spoken to who've shifted from a traditional sales relationship with their customer, where people are buying things when their last one has broken, that service-based models where the company continues to own the item, maintains a customer relationship that you don't normally get when selling one-off components or products. Early adopters, I believe, can certainly get a competitive advantage from that sort of circular approach, not least because consumers nowadays are a lot more interested in the sustainability footprint of what they're purchasing. And improved resilience, and of course that's even more important now post-COVID. If your supply chains are shorter, if the supply chains rely on more local producers wherever possible, if you're using less raw materials and virgin resources at the outset, you by definition are going to build a more resilient and more viable economy for your company. Next slide, please. At the city scale, very similar as you would expect, really. Clearly, there's a reduction in overall carbon emissions from those efficiencies and in processes, and the reduced extraction of raw materials, reduced transport as well, potentially. There's waste reduction. I mentioned earlier that a lot of opportunities in designing out waste, moving towards a zero waste world as the ultimate goal. I've already mentioned the new innovation and employment opportunities, which at a city scale, if circular approaches were adopted, en masse would have a significant impact on both the city's carbon footprint, economy, and job prospects, particularly for young people with the new skills that would be required. There's opportunities to improve health and livability all through that, reduce carbon emissions, the employment opportunities, the skills, and so on. All of that can have a really positive impact on people's quality of life. And it can build ultimately a more resilient economy and a more resilient city as a result. Next slide, please. So what has Industry 4.0 got to do with Circular 4.0 or the circular economy? Well, there's a growing focus on responsible production and consumption now. I mentioned earlier that consumers are now increasingly aware of the impact of their own lifestyles and therefore the impact of the products and services that they're purchasing. They're moving to repairable, repurposed items. They're moving to models where they don't no longer own items, but lease them and have them replaced at the end of a life. In manufacturing, there's a shift towards products that are designed for reuse and remanufacture. The new right to repair laws that are coming in across the world will embrace that in legislative requirements for manufacturers to keep spares of products for decades almost. And then mentioning waste again, the industrial symbiosis approach, where waste products from one industry can be shared, donated, sold to other industries as a raw material in a completely different industry. Next slide, please. There's a potential to rethink design right from the outset and the processes that go into manufacturing a particular product to enable access to components, materials, and resources. I mentioned the importance of the supply chain, transparency, tracking materials from source to consumer so that people understand where not only the product, but the components that have made up that product have originated. Optimized delivery, again, is a really important aspect of new technology, data-driven deliveries, reducing fuel and pollution. And all of those are supported behind the scenes, often by innovative technologies, Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, robotics, real-time logistics apps, and so on. And we all experience those at the consumer end, if you like, by tracking parcels on websites and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that in a very simple way, we at Opportunity Peterborough have played our part in using new technology around the circular economy through our Share Peterborough platform. You can log on to this after the event and see how it works. Basically, it enables businesses and other organisations to post items that they have for that they have surplus, that they're underused, that they no longer need, and other businesses can register things that they need or are seeking. So the site effectively matches those two together and a transaction takes place. Next slide, please. What we're able to do behind the scenes as well is look at the impact of those individual transactions. So whilst people may get a good feeling from donating something that they no longer need, there is also environmental and social impacts as a result of that transaction, however small. Those aggregate up to the city scale, to the sort of figures you see on the screen in front of you there. So each transaction people can see contributes to all three aspects of sustainability. Next slide, please. So my closing remarks before I hand over to our next speaker. Basically, technology can't fix everything. It's an obvious statement, but it can play a role in transitioning from circular economy to circular economy from the current linear approaches. It can improve efficiency of logistics. It can design out waste. It can design out pollution. And those are the core elements of building a circular business and building a circular city. It enables the implementation of more circular business models, perhaps a greater reliance on local suppliers, and where they don't exist, potential to invest and develop those supplies more locally. It provides innovation opportunities. I mentioned earlier, the things that we currently discard can be really good raw materials for new innovative products and services. It supports the growth in green jobs, something we're really beginning to focus on now in Peterborough. And as I mentioned earlier, it decouples resource use and the environmental impacts, general environmental impacts, from the economic growth that we seek and support across the city. And ultimately, it builds a more resilient economy whilst improving the quality of life of local residents. So technology plays a really big role, we think, in circular Peterborough, and it's something we hope to focus on over the coming months. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Holly Stower, who's Lead Associate Resources and Environment at the Cleantech Group. And she's going to talk about the clean tech and the circular economy for SMEs. So very much looking forward to Holly's presentation. Over to you, Holly. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Trevor. I'm really interested to learn about your circularity platform as well. It's really smart. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly. I lead our research work in resources and environment. And what that means is I spend a lot of my time tracking investment trends across the globe around clean technologies. So anything sustainable in technology. And what I focus on is waste, water, air, fashion, construction, natural resources. So really a broad aspect, but one underpinning theme is definitely circular economy. If I could go to the next slide. So what is Cleantech Group? So we're split into 3 lines of work. As I said, I sit on the research team. So research, consulting, and events. And our approach to research is we track investment trends, partnerships, the ways companies are working together with clean tech innovators. And in tracking that over time, we start to build an overview of the trends of where venture capitalists are investing in certain companies, what areas are blossoming and what new technologies are exciting and might change the world. And from that, we put that on our i3 platform, tracking those trends, and then we write about them more qualitatively. And then how we do that is we speak to a lot of innovators and we speak to a lot of investors and corporates to really understand the drivers, challenges, market dynamics of these investment trends. The other track of business that we do is consulting. So we work with corporates, so big FMCGs, oil and gas companies, for example, and we help them engage in the clean tech ecosystem, either by running challenges to help meet certain aims. For example, we worked with Diageo recently on helping them with their water stewardship, so to adopt water reuse and recycling technologies in some of their drinks manufacturing in India. And that's, the consultant line of business, or we help companies invest a clean tech ecosystem a bit better. And then the event side of the business, we have 3 big events every year. Our next one coming up is Clean Tech Forum Asia. Next slide, please. So we've been going for about 20 years. So we have really deep and broad networks. So just an example of some of the numbers and the data that we have access to here. Next slide, please. So as I said, we've worked with a number of corporates, governments who wish to make their processes more circular, promoting reuse, repair, remanufacturing, refill, or recycling. And as Trevor outlined some of the key circular economy concepts, I will share some of the reasons from corporates and governments of why they wish to engage in the circular economy and more broadly clean tech. So one, keen to unlock about the $4.5 trillion of potential economic output with circular models. They want to save money on landfill tax, on logistics to do with waste, as well as the feedstocks by efficiently reusing or recycling any materials. They want to improve operational efficiency and reduce operating costs, attract talent. People are increasingly attracted by more green jobs and the green credentials of businesses prior to joining. Market pressures, maybe your competitors are starting to adopt more sustainable practices, regulation, consumer demand, or societal and government's aims. The list goes on. But over the next 5 minutes, I hope to focus on 2 examples from the clean tech ecosystem, with the aims of giving examples to SMEs from our research and consultancy work. So firstly, we'll look at right to repair, specifically electronic waste and IT equipment on more of the B2B side. And then I'll look at more of an enabling technology around supply chain logistics. So tracking resources from when they were formed to even post-consumer to really create and track that circular model. So if we go to the next slide and the next slide after that. Great, thank you. So the movement surrounding right to repair really demands that repair should be accessible, affordable, and mainstream. So using e-waste as an example, it's estimated that by 2030, the global e-waste output is estimated to double to 74.7 million tons. So the specific company that I'll focus on here is a company called 3Step IT. They are a Finnish company and they work with businesses to provide a fully circular IT solution. So leasing, renting and repairing returned equipment. And often if that equipment is returned, then they'll recycle that at the end of its useful life. So over COVID, they surveyed about 100 businesses in an attempt to capture and understand the changing work practices following COVID-19 disruption. They found that 84% of businesses had purchased additional hardware to facilitate home working. And due to this increasing uncertainty and need for flexibility around working practices, they've also found that over half of organizations were more likely to finance or lease assets over the next 2 years. So this sort of represents, in practice, a push for circularity and ultimately utilizing this business disruption as a driver for circularity in business practice. Although there, still some challenges remains for some companies. If they want to do it in-house, a lot of specialist skills are required and it's costly to recycle some materials. There's sort of an educational barrier. A lot of companies have cybersecurity concerns and privacy concerns. And also there's a struggle to enforce some public policy. So there are oncoming extended producer responsibility regulations that are really difficult to hold companies to accountable for. If we could go to the next slide. So next I'm going to look at sort of supply chain logistics solutions. And what that means is marking and tracking goods and materials through supply chains to ensure sufficient delivery or to track damage to goods. So over 2020, we saw significant investment into supply chain tracking innovators, and largely in response to a lot of global supply chain disruptions. And the proliferation of these solutions enables circular economy as value is tracked across the supply chain and can be tracked as well post-consumer. Next slide, please. So some of the key trends that we found in undertaking this research. One of those is supply chain visibility. So it provides connectivity and communication, both upstream and downstream, into orders and shipment status. What's enabling a lot of these technologies and solutions to be cheaper and affordable is the availability of data. So how cheap low-cost sensors are, availability of satellite data, data collection devices, for example. They're also more accurate and granular. And lastly, machine learning and enabling predictive capabilities, so including asset failure, shipment delay, etc. Some of those key drivers that we found, climate risks, so operational disruptions from more physical risks, like which will only increase, like weather disruptions, wildfire, drought, etc. The growing supply chain complexity, buyer pressure. So a lot of buyers are actually wanting this data and know that they can access it and it's available, as well as regulatory requirements to provide origin or authenticity of goods. But a lot of this is largely in food and high value minerals or automotive components. Next slide, please. So yes, those are those two examples. Do reach out if you have any questions or want to reach out to anything about Cleantech Group. But I'll pass back now to you, Trevor. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Holly. And again, there will be opportunity for questions at the end, and you've got Holly's contact details there. But a really helpful insight, I think, into how that new technology is already being used. Anecdotally, I pick these sorts of examples up in my work, but it's great that Cleantech are really heavily involved in this and understand it, and we're able through those examples, I think, to use those to promote that environmental and economic benefits of circular economy to a wider audience, all being well. So thank you, and we move on now to our second speaker, which is Robin Haycock, the director of Fernhay Partners, with a very interestingly titled presentation. As you can see there, the cardboard box takes a sustainable journey. So over to you, Robin.
Hi, my name is Robin Haycock. I'm a director of Fernhay, which is an SME working in last mile logistics, supplying products to companies like UPS. We've seen a massive rise in e-commerce over the last few years, and it's accelerated. So it's quite a problem to solve to try and make cardboard boxes sustainable. Base material, as an aside, is quite sustainable. Cardboard is quite sustainable. It eventually gets to kitchen roll, which isn't sustainable, but that's its last use of paper. Next slide. Okay, so when I thought about this topic, I was in my kitchen at the time, and you see a picture of my kitchen, and I wondered whether I lived the life of this topic. And I suppose when I look at the materials and the way that I service those things, the knives in particular, I maintain them myself. The materials used there are stainless steel, steel itself, wood. And the actual toaster in the background is been serviced by myself and added an extra heating element into it. So the question for Fernhay has always been, how can we minimize our impacts on society when we actually supply products that do have impacts on society? So yeah, next slide. Next slide. That's it. So here's our product. We basically work for companies like UPS, and that's our main partner on a lot of the work, to try and work out ways of removing vans from cities. Vans generally have been diesels. They will go to electric, but that doesn't solve all of the problems of people and planet. For example, congestion, curbside access, and accidents, and consumption of energy. Ultimately, even if you shift to an electric van, that still consumes quite a lot of energy. So we have a bunch of IP. We are in production and sale of both of those products. The thing on the top right is a bicycle. Well, actually, it's a cycle. It has 4 wheels and it's electric powered. and it has a detachable box on the back to try and solve one of the big problems that we face when we try and replace vans. The product at the bottom is a powered walker. It goes on pavements. And when you start thinking about the problems that we have to solve as we move more and more parcels and we have less and less shops, which is essentially what is happening and will continue to happen, we have to look at the impacts that we generate by delivering all of these brown cardboard boxes to people's doors. The other thing that we need to be clear on is that logistics companies have very small margins, and they are under a great deal of demand to deliver more and more service in terms of time slots. That in its own right has a problem associated with it. So we have developed products that effectively are profitable when compared to a van, and you need to think about that when you try to solve the problems that we're trying to solve. Next slide. So we have always, I suppose, as Fernhay, focused mostly on planet, but then more and more on the people side of things, but our focus has been planet. But you cannot have a successful business, either our customers or ourselves, without considering that we need to be profitable. So most companies have focused on profit and then have been pushed generally in a planet direction or a people direction. Our main customers effectively have to admit that they pollute, but they pollute on our behalf because they move goods all over the world that we want. So how do we do something about that? Well, we can start putting legislation in place, which is what we're starting to see, that high carbon emitters start to pay. We can look at how we restrict access to city centres for vans or any other service equipment, and start pushing people towards cycling and walking solutions. So we will also probably end up with carbon accounting. And all of those lot fit very well with the circular economy debate that we're talking about. How do we use the equipment well and reduce the impacts on people and planet? Next slide, please. So what you have to consider, I suppose, is how do you design a product? Well, I mean, effectively, we are making products that we wish to sell as an SME, and in a circular economy world, you have to start questioning whether we should be making more of them and selling more of them. And so a lot of what we've designed in that product you see in front of you is all around how do I keep it alive, how do I service it, how does it have a second life, what's the materials I use in it, as well as how do I use it to reduce the impacts during the period when it's on the road. And we've done most of those by choosing certain materials and collaborating with our partners on how we can use the equipment for a longer period of time and service it. So I think it's a tricky thing to look at a circular economy when the thing you do is make stuff and sell it. And I think we've tried to do that by saying, look, instead of it being a three years and you throw that e-quad away, it's 6 years of nominal life, and we expect to continuously service it should you choose to want to do that. Or we find a way of using the materials in another product, or we update the product and sell it to another customer with a different service package. And that's where we are. Next slide, please. So I think when you start looking at circular economy and when you start looking at generally problems to solve, whether that's climate change, circular economy, they actually fit together quite nicely, or people, you have to look at the boundary conditions and decide what is the best way of solving the problem. So what I mean by that is we personally fit in last mile logistics. That's how people recognize us. They recognize the products that we make as things that deliver in cities. But in order for us to actually make those products work and replace a van, we actually have to start with a box and fill that box at an out-of-town depot, and then manage to get those boxes into town, then manage to get them onto cycles, then manage to get them delivered, and then manage to get them serviced. So actually the problem that we're solving is from the depot where the vans used to be filled with boxes, right the way into servicing of the product and how people come and pick up the bikes in the city and all those kinds of things. So there is a business to be had that is wider than just selling the things that we make. And I suppose that allows you to find a solution that addresses these circular economy issues and addresses what the customer wants, which is ultimately to replace vans in cities, because we all want that. Yeah, next slide, please. I think that's it. Yeah. So any questions, happy to take those. I guess that they'll be done at the end.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Robin. And yes, as we've said, please use the chat facility. I know there's at least one question in there at the moment, but we'll pick up as many questions as we can at the end. And thank you, Robin, for that really practical insight into one example and almost the complexity, if you like, of circular economy and the contradictions almost for businesses, as you say, manufacturing, yet supporting the economy. And from a personal point of view, it's been great to see your idea develop from I remember many years ago you showing me sketches of these very vehicles. So it's really good to see them operational and beginning to have a really positive impact. So on to our third and final speaker before we go into the discussion and question and answer session towards the end, and that's a presentation from Dr. Lewis Walsh, marketing lecturer at the Faculty of Business and Law with Anglia Ruskin University. So I'll hand over to you, Lewis. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Trevor. Right, I'm just going to do the share screen while we're here. I do apologise in advance, just as you were oh, that's not the right screen, hang on.
We can see that now.
Yeah, that's all right, got the one screen up, 1 second. Joys of technology, so it should be on screen. No, that one. Yeah, it should be that one. Can you guys see that okay?
We can, oh yeah, if you just make that to presentation mode, I think we'll be good to go.
Yep, okay, great. No, apologies, presentation mode doesn't quite work with
all right, well,
yeah,
we can
share
see
screen
it's
thing.
fine.
It's fine, fantastic. Yeah, sorry about that. Let me just take it out of presentation mode. Never the best start, apologies. Is that going to work there? Perfect. Okay, yes, so my name is Dr. Lewis Walsh from Anglia Ruskin University, representing the GrowIN 4.0 project. This presentation really just going to give you guys a whistle-stop tour through the GrowIN project, which was made up of regions in 5 different countries. We've got the UK, Denmark, Germany, Belgium, and Holland. Really, just to start us off, I mean, I'm sure most of you guys are aware of what Industry 4.0 is, but just in case anyone's not, it's really around the application of digital tools and technology, really in all their forms, to the value chains of businesses who make things, or have businesses that are operationally asset intensive, so like power grids, wind farms, etc. So in a nutshell, it's around the merging between digital and the physical and the digital worlds. And Industry 4.0 is really disruptive because it has some very attractive benefits to businesses. Those things can be called lower production costs or the introduction of mass customization. I'm not going to go through all these things in one hit just because we've only got 10 minutes. But one of the things that really underpins all of these benefits is data. So when you go through digitizing or automation of manufacturing processes, this creates a number of feedback loops which helps one to generate businesses using it to generate a lot of data. And with that data, albeit with the right interrogation and being able to understand it, firms can actually receive data, can engage in data-driven solutions. And this underpins with evidence and timeliness a number of the strategies that firms can employ to lower production costs, to generally increase safety in the business or combat staff shortages. You can run scenario basis based on that data and a number of things. And that's really what GrowIN 4.0 is looking to support. We support manufacturing SMEs on their journey towards Industry 4.0 by helping firms build strong competencies in these things. And also we've created a number of tools to help facilitate firms in moving towards Industry 4.0, but also understanding that data as well that they generate through it in order to make these kind of informed decisions that help them to realize those benefits I talked about on the previous slide. And the sort of rationale from this, at least from the European Commission's perspective, is this idea that European SMEs, particularly in the North Sea region, are really falling behind our American friends over the pond in implementation of Industry 4.0. And this lagging, at least on a policy level, is seen as creating a drag on regional and national competitiveness. But for particularly SME manufacturers, that, like all SMEs, there are a number of challenges for SMEs. And again, I'm not going to go through all these in huge detail, but the lack of information, lack of support, lack of investment in R&D and knowledge. But again, a lot of these things can be underpinned by the fact that SMEs, whether you're an SME manufacturer or you own a small retailer, tend to suffer from three distinct challenges. And it's a lacking of financial, technological, and human resources. Okay, and those things underpin, again, a number of these challenges. As SME owner managers, most of the time, or smaller businesses, managers within these tend to wear many hats. It does make long-term strategic thinking or moving towards R&D or reaching the right professional levels of support or bringing the right knowledge in very, very challenging. And for the GrowIN 4.0 project, what we try to do is bring in a needs assessment. So we help firms to assess the sort of the needs that they have. We help them assess what needs they actually have in their business, and then we help bring in a number of tools to meet those needs to reach Industry 4.0. So whether that's business analysis tools, we've brought in tools to help them with return on investment, benefits tracking, benefits identification. We have tools around helping the mindset change of businesses in order to move on to Industry 4.0, big data strategies and our knowledge generally. So I guess for GrowIN 4.0, our aim is to support the preparedness and decision making of businesses who are looking to make their journey towards Industry 4.0. I'm just checking, can you guys still see the slides I'm presenting? You can, yeah? Okay, brilliant. So as I've got two different screens up at the moment here with different things on them. So, and in terms of those tools, one of them, which I'll just run us through now very briefly here, is our benefits identification tool. So benefits identification tool, which created, is really around helping businesses that are firms that are looking to bring in a new digital technology or a new technology for their business, and helping them to analyze and evaluate the various benefits and or potential disbenefits that that technology could bring into their businesses. So first it's a half-day workshop, and there's a few images here of us running over that half-day workshop with a firm. And in that tool, in that workshop, we really work with firms in terms of how the functions of that technology link to the potential benefits that firm could get from that new technology, identifying disbenefits and linking them to the business changes, and then making a broader overall link between the benefits a firm could receive from this new technology investment and their strategy. And one of the really interesting things that we found out through this is that it's the core challenge to businesses and firms. It's not lying in making that technology change. It's not bringing in the technology itself. And it's about the broader organizational changes that that firm needs to make in order to fully realize the benefits that new technology can bring. So many firms bring in autonomous robots, or they bring in some form of new technology, but a lot of the times haven't taken into account the broader disruption that might have to make to their overall business model, or that they have to retrain a huge amount of their staff, or make a major change in their branding or their marketing. So it's not just about bringing in new technology and then instantly getting the benefits from it. It's about making broad and often very expensive. There is I think it's a McKinsey line, where for every $1 spent on new technology, one has to spend $9 on business changes. And that's very true here. Often firms bring in new technologies, but haven't taken into account the broader and long-term organizational changes that need to be made, which is very expensive, and therefore sometimes you can find that they're actually kind of worse off for that as well. So it's about this, our benefits realization workshop, or identification workshop here, is about helping firms assess that and making the decision: do they actually need to take that technology on? Does it work for their business in the long term? If you want some more information about the GrowIN Project, there's a number of sites you can use to see our tools, or email me directly if you wanted to hear more about the other tools that we have available. Thanks very much for listening, and apologies about the technology issue there.
Thank you, Lewis, for that, and again, a really useful insight into GrowIN 4.0. And as you can see there, it really does focus on all of the benefits from adopting new technologies, and helps to simplify the connectivity for businesses seeking to get into that world. So I think that's it for our three speakers now. And what I wanted to do with the rest of the session today, we've got just over half an hour, so I'm confident we will finish by our advertised time of 12 noon. I know some panelists have got to leave a little bit early due to other commitments, but hopefully we can keep the discussion going for as long as possible. What I'd like to do first is just use again that polling approach that we used right at the outset, just to prompt a bit of discussion, really. The first one is around barriers to adopting new technology, and I know that Lewis started to, or covered some of these in his slides. I've come up with some very simplistic responses here compared with that, but it'd be really helpful if either through your direct knowledge or what you hear from businesses, what's the biggest barrier facing companies? Just give you a few seconds to vote on that. Okay. Do we have the result there? Sorry, I haven't seen, I can't see the result there, Rebecca. I don't know if that's, oh, it's come up. Yeah, again, some interesting findings there. I guess none of those are surprising. Lack of time to give enough consideration and lack of knowledge of what's available feature very highly. Limited resources is always there. And interestingly, skills, although there's a reasonable percentage there, not seen as one of the main barriers to this. I'm going to use the outputs from the poll, if we can leave it on the screen, and maybe just go round the panelists and just ask for a view on that, whether they recognize those findings, and you know, perhaps comments from their perspective. Holly, perhaps if I go to you first on this, is that your experience, what you're seeing there in the polling results?
Yeah, absolutely. So our experience on this, I mean, we help with a lot of this, mostly lack of knowledge on what's available. So the example that I can use is more of a challenge-based consultancy project. So we would work with a company to identify areas that they've already set a sustainability goal. So we identify areas by doing a market scan of the types of technology that could help them meet their desire around sustainability. So let's use water as an example. So taking this step by step, I am a FMCG and I want to reduce the water use in some of my operational plants. So in terms of lack of time to get enough consideration, the minimum challenge time that we take, and we work with companies, and as Lewis said, it is not just a technology solution, it is organizational change, and that's what we're helping with every step of the way. So from start to finish of doing a challenge, you're looking at about a period of minimum 3 months, really fast track, up to 6, 12 to implementation. You need to involve so many different players within an organization. It's not just the sustainability team, and a technology often won't work if it's just the sustainability team. You need the people on the ground to be involved at the beginning of what they've already implemented, what might work, will it be effective? We need to review numbers. We need that communication with the innovator as well as the corporate as well. So it's a process, and it needs dedication and resources that some don't have to hand often, and it needs to be earmarked. But that's not the case with every technology type, and every technology type is incredibly different. There are a couple that I would recommend now to anyone that are more B2B on the software side, that requires less of those resources, where it's not involving high capex, high risk softwares that are focused on SMEs. Like there's an emergence of B2B providers offering emissions management. So we'll help a company disclose, work out their own emissions, and that's a really good starting point. So all of these aspects are not required to take that first step around sustainability or circularity in just understanding the needs of your company and identifying the areas where energy or resources are leaking out of your business model. But yeah, that's why I can speak to those.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. And over to you, Robin, because you've had very real experience of this, not just with the product that you showed us earlier, but you know, in many aspects of your work. Do you recognise those findings? What?
Yeah, I mean, to introduce what most people class as a fairly disruptive thing, which is replace vans, which 99% of all deliveries are made by vans, and most of those are diesel at the moment, with a funny little bicycle, is quite a stretch for companies that make 3 to 5% margin on vast volumes of trade. So they like to make tiny little iterations on an existing model. So going from either a diesel van to an electric van is hard work mentally for very large companies, even if they can find the finances at work, and they do now for electric vans. But then to say, well, do you know what, instead of having all your vans lined up, I'm going to line up hundreds and hundreds of 2 cubic meter boxes, and then you're going to deliver them in a different way downtown, and then downtown you've got to have another hub, and the way that people are trained and the way that they use vans or bicycles is totally different. That's hard work. So you start with a sustainability team, but they have no generally legal power within a business. They have to typically manage other people's budgets. A good way of doing it, actually, in a way, but it's a long old process to start turning big organizations around to start thinking about different ways of doing things.
Thank you for that. And presumably, I think you said UPS are the primary partner in some of the work you've done in London and so on. What was it that got them over the edge to sort of embrace what you were promoting there?
Well, it's a collaboration. So we've designed those products to suit that customer. Luckily, it suits other customers as well. And it's been 4 or 5 years worth of journey, as you know, Trevor. I think they are influenced by a collection of things. Some of it is stick, so some of it is restrictions to access in cities post 11 a.m. And now actually even more so. COVID has pushed cycling and walking agendas in cities. So there is a certain, this is going to happen. And then there is a certain, I want to make it happen. So UPS are actually a very positive organization in terms of their drive towards reducing their emissions. They emit a lot on our behalf. I have to keep on adding on our behalf.
Yes.
It's a bit like oil companies. We consume oil and then beat up the company for producing it. So you know, UPS is moving strongly towards electrification of everything last mile. And they're putting biofuels into their trucking, and they're doing things that it's a huge initiative. And they, like many companies now in this market, that they want to lead, and they genuinely want to lead. But it's going back to your question, how do they do it? It's a lot of work, and they have to put a lot of resources in and put a lot of risk in, and quite a lot of these things are risky.
Thank you. Lewis, do you have a view on that from the GrowIN perspective? You've come across some of these challenges and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, just to really reiterate what I said in the presentation, it's not that owner managers or businesses employ people that strictly lack a specific knowledge or aren't experts, or in some ways don't have resources, but it's just by definition of the size. But from our perspective, looking at SME manufacturers, by definition, their very size, it's just, you know, in these businesses, constantly firefighting, especially with a volatile external environment. I'm sure Robin's business had some fun with the global shortage of cardboard that we've just seen as a result of the pandemic. You know, when you're in that situation, it's really hard to get the headspace to just think clearly about these things, especially in the circular economy, where you're really pushing the boundaries of technology. You're pushing the boundaries of your regulators' knowledge, so they're putting compliance barriers in front of you as well, to some extent as well, because everyone's at the edge of their knowledge barriers with this. So it's a really challenging time to just get the headspace to think about things, and I think that's what projects like ours, but just general business support is there for. It's about giving entrepreneurs and owner managers that support in terms of just getting to think about the broader, say the broader things that need to change, or even just long-term planning support with that. And that's probably the biggest difference between small and the larger firms, who, you know, they can employ a compliance officer, they can employ someone with the specific task of doing that long-term plan. They have CIOs, etc. And I think that's the big difference. Conversely, though, small firms are much more agile and if you do get that headspace, you are able to derive a competitive advantage in order to be flexible and in order to change with the wind, as it were. So it's really down to the skills and and it's really specific to to who the owner manager is and the staff that they have for that small firm.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. We'll move on to I think building off the particular question we've considered. You know, I think we've all got in our own respective worlds, we've all got a role in promoting this, whether it's through you know, academia, our interaction with firms at Opportunity Peterborough, whether it's as entrepreneurs or as Cleantech. You know, we've all got a role to play. So the next question is really about what businesses need most in the adoption of new technology. This will help again, not just Opportunity Peterborough. I'm sure Lewis and everyone else on the panel, just to help sort of target research and support activities for to encourage more businesses to go down this this route. So very simple question there about what you think businesses will benefit most from in considering the new technologies. We've sort of answered that from a different angle, but please please vote on that. Just give it a few minutes for a few seconds rather for the responses to appear. Should be with us any second. It's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, this bit, I always think. It's except we have got some votes. Okay. So yeah, we have there advice and support and funding being the primary areas. Again, not a particular surprise, but perhaps the nature of those opportunities, advice and support is what's critical here. So looking at you first, Robin, what would you say to those responses? Do you recognise those as being the main aspects, or are there others we've missed?
I think yeah, it's probably the right thing to do. I suppose in our particular case, we are trying to get somebody else to adopt new technology. So again, with a lot of SMEs, they're looking to sell a product or service, I guess, of something that they've invented. And so I took the funding opportunity because we are actually in a funding round. But actually the advice and support is interesting. I tried to click that as well because the advice and support on how to get funding opportunities is quite. You start as an inventor and you thought about how to solve a problem, and you've got customers that are interested in how you solve that problem, and you find that actually you need £3 million to scale up properly, and you need advice and support on an area you know nothing about. So scaling up from or introducing new technology, you need advice and support. So I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Lewis, what's your view on that? Is that reflect from the companies that you speak to in your world?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm from university, so I'm going to say, engage more with universities. But, there are very, very few advantages that have been gleaned from the marketisation of universities back with Cameron and Clegg. But one of the few is that universities, doesn't matter if it's ARU, Cambridge or Durham, anyone like that, all universities now have a strong interest in business engagement. And that, so, if you're looking for funding opportunities, universities will naturally want to work with you. It's part of the business model of the university now, quite frankly, to engage with businesses, support with funding opportunities, but also you've got some really great schemes like the knowledge transfer scheme, KTP, or the management KTPs. What that basically means is, as I mentioned before, sometimes the headspace can be an issue, especially for smaller firms. Universities part fund is something like a doctoral level student or a post PhD to come into the business and do research specifically for that business. So basically implanting researchers into businesses on a 6 to 9 month or a year period to do a very specific technical task that's linked to their expertise that they might have their PhD in, for example. And those are great schemes. Almost every university does them. Obviously, we do them at ARU, so if you're interested. But no, generally speaking, that is one of the things. Universities are very business engagement centric now, and this is common in lots of industries, not just universities. I mean, even regulators are, it's not a policing approach to regulation anymore. What we're seeing in our research with regulators is a much more business support element or attitude with regulators to businesses. So if you've got a regulatory issue with, say, trading standards or any other regulator I can't think of right now, you can go to them and they will work with you towards compliance, where pre-2000 it would have been a more policing inspectorial approach to that. So we're seeing lots of public bodies take this business support notion, and I think that's really important. So I guess my 2 pence on that.
No, it's really interesting, and I do. My background was actually in business regulation many years ago, and I was present, if you like, when that shift took place from the routine inspections that dominated the lives of businesses, as well as those undertaking the inspections, to one of more of self-regulation and support. So it does have a benefit in leveling out and making the landscape more fair, I think. So, and Holly, a view from you on those on that poll?
Yeah, and just to speak to what you and Lewis were just discussing about working with regulators and their increasing drive to more support businesses with advice, we're working with regulators across the world to help them better understand what technologies are available for them to promote amongst SMEs. To connect, those governments are connecting up innovators with SMEs on specific challenges, or are connecting up, they are SMEs connecting them up with larger corporates like oil and gas firms to develop things like anaerobic digestion on small scale farms, for example. And that's across the board, taking a really holistic view across all clean tech sectors, from more fuel-based, traditional, conventional fuels, all the way through to things like water or farming. Onto, I guess, funding opportunities and what we see increasingly in more and more sectors. If you are an SME with a new invention, technology, what we would classify an innovator, is we're seeing more and more accelerator programs, both public and private accelerator programs. Things like Imagine H2O on the water side. There's the ones that have been going for a long time that keep expanding, like Techstars in the US, but they're really enabling the innovator or the SME to gain access to corporate partners, venture capital partners, investors, etc. And it's really a fast track into learning all about that ecosystem that you want to be a part of. And that's been quite successful for new technologies to expand. And then to speak to the advice and support aspect of the poll, that's what we provide. So in our experience, we saw, following on from the 2019 commitments, and I know this is on more on the corporate and government side, but it trickles down to SMEs. So from the 2019 flurry of corporate commitments to net zero, that's, I think if that's captured 2019 and 2020, continued into 2020, I think 2021 will be defined by the year businesses put plans in place. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing more and more consultancy projects that we're getting across the board, across loads of sectors, from these corporates that have made these commitments over the last 2 years, and us helping them to be able to do that. So I imagine that would be the same for SMEs that see some of these big corporates as primary competitors.
Thank you. That's really useful. We've got one more poll.
Trevor, in that as well, in terms of people starting to write sustainability plans. It's a bit like the air quality plans that were created. They ended up being nicely put on shelves after they were done as a task. And now we're starting to see air quality becoming a live thing. I think the same is with sustainability plans, net zero, routes to zero carbon, and all those sorts of things. They were lip service to start with, and now big corporates are properly looking at it, and we see that in their relationship with us. So we're very much a partnership of how do we solve part of the problem of what UPS are trying to solve, for example.
And just to add to that, and I think what's different to a lot of the commitments previously made in the corporate sustainability space is you have the backing of regulators. So mandatory disclosure regulations from financial services through to the United Kingdom, Bays have suggested that they want to make that appropriate and regulate for large corporates to have to disclose their emissions performance over time. And the way technology is meeting with that is tools and software tools and accountability tools, traceability tools to hold these companies to account. So yeah, I think this time there will be some real teeth, and so there's some real optimism around corporate sustainability that will trickle down to SME in the SME space.
They completely need to be beaten up around it. I suppose you need a level playing field, and that's what legislation can do for us, is you can work on a project like we're doing. How do you get rid of vans in cities? And then you can find ways of doing that, and then you push forward a policy that will solve that problem. And then you put the sticks in place that beats up the people that aren't going to do that journey. So it's a combination always between public, private, and big and small businesses, with regulation leveling the playing field for us all.
Yeah, absolutely, and making it clear what the rules are, so that everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Trevor, I'm going to have to drop off, but thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Very interesting. I'm sure it's a topic we'll return to again.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. We've got one more poll, which I'd like us to just go through. We can be, I think, fairly brief with our answers, looking at the time. We've got about 10 minutes, and there are a couple of questions I'd like to pick up from the chat. So, but how widely do you think the links are between the circular economy, or how widely known, sorry, are the links between circular economy and Industry 4.0? Just four options there for people to submit. I'll just do mine. And again, we'll wait for the results to show. This is where we announce the winner, I think, or is that something else? Do we have the results in? Of the... Okay, and again, I guess that's probably where I would have put this, that there is awareness. I think it's growing, but I think there is need for more. And the gaps we found, we do an annual business survey which covers sustainability and covers Industry 4.0 in different sort of sections of the questionnaire. What we find is, both on Industry 4.0 and circular economy, that people have got more and more awareness, but they still struggle to identify that first step. Once you've done that, I think things become clearer, things become easier, notwithstanding all the challenges we talked about earlier. But if I could go to Lewis first, just for a comment, a very brief comment, if you would, on that.
Depends where you are, is my perspective. So particularly for UK SME manufacturers, one thing we found in our research with Chris, who's also in the audience here, is that UK manufacturers specifically seem to almost passively adopt Industry 4.0. So that to start, if you look at our American friends or our European partners, they strategize around Industry 4.0 much more than we do in the UK. In the UK, yes, we take all those technology benefits and we invest in technology, but 4.0 benefits seem to come with the technology that they've brought in for other business reasons, whether it's to be more efficient, to be more green. But that's different to having a long-term strategy for Industry 4.0. And there's a bit of a disconnect in the UK between what policymakers think businesses are doing with Industry 4.0, which they think businesses are strategizing more to them, and what we found that businesses are doing, albeit this is a slightly smaller sample. We need to upscale our research on this to a broader, larger sample, but that's seemingly one of the big differences between particularly UK firms and manufacturers and our friends in Europe who have a slightly more long-term orientation towards Industry 4.0, or at least a long-term strategy. So yeah, it depends where you are, I guess, is that link.
Thank you for that. I can see that entirely. Holly, quick comment from you on that one.
Yeah, I think maybe I'd change my selection to perhaps little awareness of the links. In just that, I think in approaching both, you're kind of meeting the same aims. You are, for a business, from taking a purely business point of view, you are improving operational efficiency. You are being more resource efficient and ultimately saving money, and likely providing a better product. But it does take that holistic view, which is very rare, from having oversight over your entire supply chain, and not just as it gets to the consumer, is adopting that wider circular economy model of looking at resources after the consumer. So one example that I can use is, I think P&G are working with a company called Digimark on their project called Holy Grail 2.0. A lot of buzzwords there, but basically they're going to track plastics by adding a specific marker on the plastics that they use. The idea of that is they spend a lot of money producing a specific type of plastic, and by tracking that after it gets to the consumer and bringing that back into the factory, they can save a considerable amount of money, because their whiter than white fairy bottle, they can get that back and save a lot of money. And that is a unique example of really joined up thinking around the circular economy, but a rarity.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think more and more, Robin put up a very interesting slide earlier that showed those overlaps between profit, sustainability, and so on. And I think what I see more and more is people are moving into that center space now. At one time, in virtually every aspect of work that I was involved with, people were still looking at things in silos. So the people promoting increased productivity were not having any consideration of the impact of that productivity, which, go back to the Industrial Revolution, was quite significant. But I think more and more, the Venn diagrams, if you like, are aligning, and people are beginning to see those links. And that, from a business perspective, purchasing, it's fine to have an ulterior motive of increasing profits. That's what businesses are about. But to be able to see those sort of Venn diagram, holistic views of the world, that shows that by doing that, you can actually have a beneficial impact on the environment and on people's lives. I think that's where it's beginning to wake up. And as I said earlier, I think from our very different perspectives, and Robin as well, from our very different perspectives of that world, we all have a role to play, and it's certainly a fascinating one. So that's the questions from the poll. So thank you very much for your responses on that. I think it's prompted some really good discussions. There's a couple of well, I'm going to link them together. There's a couple of questions that came through from a great supporter of circular economy in Peterborough, Brian Pierce, MBE, who leads the Rail World project in Peterborough, which I recommend to anybody that's in Peterborough, particularly if you've got children. Is a really good day out. And Brian's really embraced circular economy in his charitable work at that facility, but he's asking how we get the message out that this is important to the future of our children and our children's children. I mentioned in a response on the chat that we're doing our bit. It's clearly never enough, but we're doing our bit through the skills team in OP, working with Peterborough City Council to really put carbon reduction back onto the school curriculum, and circular economy is a key part of that. But I wondered whether you've got very quick views on, again, in your work, is it something that you're focused on? Holly, first, perhaps.
Sure. I mean, I can speak to consumer engagement, and I've seen increasing increasing technologies that can enable that, from simple mobile apps to screens where you have a smart bin that will teach you how to recycle and encourage you to recycle using the same behavior change tools that you have on your iPhone. So yeah, and I don't think businesses can't do this alone. We need to involve everyone around sustainability, particularly the next generation. I mean, climate change is laden with intergenerational equity issues. So yeah, there is a more around the technology side is ways to engage around sort of apps and screens, etc., to encourage behavior change. So it is happening.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that, Lewis. I noticed you posted a link there. So quick
I'm
one
going
from you.
Quick promotion of another project that we are running at the moment, Interreg Blueprint, alongside Opportunity Peterborough as well, and a varying number of county councils in the UK and our partners in France this time. Interreg Blueprint is around helping social enterprises engage in the circular economy. One of the outputs, training 2,000 to smart people to engage in the circular economy, but also one of the work packages involved in that is going into schools and promoting the circular economy within schools. So this is something we're kind of already doing. It's not the work package or the aspect I personally work on, but if you want some more information, or if you want to be connected with the people that are doing this and the councils that are doing this, drop me an email or drop Trevor an email and we'll be able to direct you to that. So this is a kind of work that's ongoing now. I think this Interreg project is running until, I'm just looking at the dates here, it's running until about 2023 or late 2023. So we're kind of in the beginning of it and scoping it out. So if you've got some ideas or you've got some insights you'd like to share about that project, do get in touch, because, you know, again, we're kind of in the sandbox mode at the moment with it. And so, you know, that could be really, really interesting. So yeah, we'd be interested to hear from you.
Thank you for that, Lewis. I think that about covers it. There was one more question in the group in the chat about whether circular economy will feature at COP26 this year. I'll answer for everybody in saying that I hope very much it does. I think it'd be a huge omission if we get to the end of that hopefully historic event and find that it's not been mentioned at all. I think there is a role for government to do more and put circular economy much more explicitly central to economic recovery, because I think there's a huge opportunity there that we could miss if we don't. So that's all for now. We're 1 minute later than advertised, but I just have a few thank yous. Obviously, thank you to Holly, to Lewis and to Robin for their insights from their respective worlds on what I personally think is a really fascinating topic, you know, aligning those two big agendas and just seeing where it gets us. Behind the scenes as well, we've had my colleagues, Sheila O'Brien, who's organised the event over many weeks now, and of course Rebecca, who has works the marketing and then the technology in a way that I couldn't even begin to. So thank you for them. They're invisible, but they're out there somewhere listening in. We are recording the event, as you saw at the outset, so we'll be providing links to what I think has been a really interesting discussion. So I'm sure we'll get a big audience for that. We will be seeking feedback from participants and panelists as well, just so that we can help shape help shape future events of this kind, because there will be more. And I think, as I said, when Robin left the event, I think it is a topic we will return to, because it's central to what Opportunity Peterborough is about. It very much sounds from the presentations we've had today that it's actually central to everybody else's as well. So let's keep pushing together to really accelerate the progress of circular economy in Peterborough and beyond. So thank you to all the participants today, those that registered and stayed with us. We'll be in touch after the event with more information. But thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.